U.S. Vice President JD Vance starts his 4-day trip in India with tough talks on trade top of the agenda. New Delhi looking to strike a deal with Washington to avert bruising reciprocal tariffs. U.S. Vice President JD Vance is in India for talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. New Delhi hoping to stave off U.S. tariffs and negotiate a trade deal with Washington. Mr. Vance is there with his wife Usha, whose parents are immigrants from India, and his 3 children. The U.S. is India's largest trade partner, and the pair share strategic interests. But President Donald Trump injected some uncertainty into that relationship when he imposed and then paused a 26% levy on Indian goods. Now, India has slashed tariffs on some U.S. goods, but there is a massive trade imbalance between them, with New Delhi holding a $45 billion surplus. Our discussions around the bilateral trade agreement, or the BTA, between U.S. and India ramping up, with teams of officials meeting in 2 days for in-person negotiations. The first phase of the deal is expected to conclude in October this year, but India is exploring the opportunity for an early tranche addressing more limited issues ahead of that deadline. The agreement is expected to cover a range of issues from tariffs to customs facilitation, with the goal of more than doubling trade to some $500 billion by 2030. One way they aim to achieve that is through a reduction of duties on goods traded. The U.S. is seeking tax cuts on some of its exports, mainly autos, petrochemicals and agricultural products, while India is hoping for concessions on labour-intensive sectors such as apparels, textiles and gems. The trade agreement is a way that both sides are hoping can help to narrow the trade deficit that Washington has with India. More Neha Poonia joins us live from New Delhi. Neha, Mr. Vance to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the next hour. We've just heard trade very likely topping that agenda, but so many parts to talking trade.
Absolutely, and this is a visit that's very high on optics, and one that India is very, very keen goes off well. The message, we're being told, that will be communicated when the two leaders sit down and hold that formal discussion, which will be followed by a dinner hosted for JD Vance and his family by Prime Minister Modi, would be that both countries are on the same side. They're willing to engage and try and find solutions to problems, whether that's on the economic and trade front or on the immigration front. An effort, experts say, to draw a sharp contrast between how the US is engaging with India's own rival in the region, China. We've seen the US-China trade war escalate, but India, on the other hand, has taken a very nuanced approach, not even criticizing the US reciprocal tariffs that have been suspended for 90 days. We're given to understand that JD Vance will push India to buy more defense equipment from the US. There's going to be an attempt to try and get India to relax some tariffs on agriculture products, something India has traditionally guarded very, very closely because of the millions of Indian farmers who depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. But the aim, of course, is going to be to try and find a way to fast-track this trade pact that both sides say should be ready. At least the first tranche should be ready by October. But, experts we've been speaking to here say that there are also some anxieties given how plain speaking JD Vance has been, especially when he was on that tour in Europe recently. Listen to what Harsh Pant, the strategic affairs expert in New Delhi, told us.
I'm sure there would be people in Delhi who would be worried that he might say things. But if you look at the trajectory of India-US relationship since Mr. Modi's visit and since Mr. Trump's coming to office, we have had a sustained level of high-level engagement between the two sides.
Despite that camaraderie that we've heard so much about, President Trump has still repeatedly called India a bad abuser of tariffs, which is why many critics in India have also accused the Modi government of bending over backwards to appease the US government. Farmers, for example, are holding protests across the country, accusing Prime Minister Modi of selling Indian interests. But of course, there is this pressure that New Delhi is facing to try and find common ground with the US, which is its largest trading partner, as soon as possible, especially with that 90-day deadline of reciprocal tariffs hanging over its head.
Oh, thanks. Neha Poonia there in New Delhi. Of course, JD Vance, the Vice President, is in Delhi for those crunch trade talks.